Okay, so when you're on the home page, you go to Grassroots Advocacy, and we have a few options, including meetings with lawmakers, which is the key item that we're talking about today. And so when you click on that, you basically see this lovely photo of some really great NAHMA and AHMA members who are meeting with Senator Cantwell, who's one of the main champions of affordable housing in Congress. And the important parts on this page are this button here, which takes you to submit a scheduling request to NAHMA. And a lot of folks filled that out. It looks like this. Can you guys all see that?
Yes.
Great. And this is, I think it's, 9 or 10 questions, a little more. And this gives me a really good idea of who you want to see, if you know, and if you don't know who you want to see in Congress, who, where you're located, where your communities are located, what programs you operate in, et cetera. And it helps me set you up with the right folks on the Hill. So thanks to those who filled this out. The other option for getting assistance with scheduling Hill visits is to email me, which a lot of you also did. So either option is just fine. And the other things that you'll see on this page are a checklist that basically tells you, a timeline. So 1 month or so before travel, the week before, the week after, et cetera. So just giving you a good idea of how to jump in to this kind of advocacy. Great. And then next we have a lot of resources on here. And I know that this probably feels like information overload if you're just getting started. So before we jump into all that, why don't we talk about the basics of Hill visits? And for those of you who have done this a bunch, thank you for your patience. And in fact, I'm sure you have some interesting anecdotes. So please feel free to throw those in as we talk about this. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is this Hill visit overview. So when you click here, what you see is more words, yay. This gives you a great idea of how to navigate the Hill. And in fact, before we go into it, let me pull up this picture. Can you guys see this picture? Oh, maybe you can't see it.
No.
Nope. Okay, so what it is, I think it's actually also here. Here it is. It's just sideways here. So sorry about that, guys. But what it is a map of the Hill. And when I first got to Washington, I don't know about you guys, I was like, so where is the hill? Like, where is the mountain that that I am supposed to be climbing? And so the Hill is this word for basically where the Capitol building sits, which is where everybody, what everybody thinks of when they talk about Congress, which is this kind of, round building in the middle. But then those people all have to work somewhere, right? And they have a bunch of staff, and those offices are spread out in this maybe several block radius around the Capitol building. So what does that tell you about your meetings? Any ideas about what it means, that the fact that the Hill is so spread out?
It means you're going to be doing some walking.
Yes.
Give yourself plenty of time in between the meetings.
Yes. Who said that?
This is Deanne from AHMA of Washington.
Hey, Deanne, one of our best Hill visit advocates. Excellent. Yes. So both of those things are true. I don't wear heels usually anyway, and this is certainly not the day to start. And then lots of time, because not only are you walking between these office buildings, but you're also having to go through security, often in between each meeting if you're going into a new building from the outside. So that's one of the key takeaways there. Some other takeaways, and why don't I just throw this out to folks who have done a bunch of Hill visits. What are some of your key takeaways just in terms of the logistics, not the messaging, but in terms of logistics?
Can I jump in again, Juliana?
Yeah, please.
Use the tunnels. Once you get in, use the tunnels. If you're in Rayburn, Longworth, Cannon, they're all connected by tunnels. And that saves you time in having to go through security again.
Great. And they're really neat. It feels like you're in the catacombs. And for those of you who have never been and don't know how to find them, the staff can help you with that. Or if it's a nice day out, you can always walk around outside.
Will people generally be on time with a meeting? If you go meet someone, will they be ready to go when you get there?
In my experience, yes. I've only had to wait, a few minutes here and there. Sometimes there's the, the schedule got totally messed up and I'm going to have to reschedule, or why don't we meet in the hall really quickly because the senator XYZ. But how have other folks experienced that? Has it been pretty timely for y'all?
This is Dave. I would say it's mostly on time as you described, but sometimes you do have to wait because the group before you or whatever they were doing before takes a little bit longer, or sometimes the person whom you were scheduled to meet with somehow is not available, and so they have to pull a plan B person out to meet with you. So sometimes, it's good for us to be on time, but it's sometimes things out of your control will impact the scheduling. So that's keep that in mind.
Yep, that's great. And if you are running late to a meeting, just give the office a call. If you Google the lawmaker and bring up their page, usually at the bottom is are their phone numbers, and just they're pretty understanding. They do meetings like this all day, so just let them know.
Hey, Juliana, this is Cindy.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
Something that Nancy and I do is we divide and conquer. So if we have meetings that are close to one another and we think we can't both make both meetings, one of us will go to one meeting and the other will go to the other meeting and then meet up later.
Yeah.
And what we also do is we don't just do the face-to-face meetings. We will take information to every office that we can that's in one of our districts. Even if we don't have a meeting scheduled, we will drop stuff off to as many as we can on the day that we're there.
Yeah, you guys are fantastic. This is why you guys won the MVP award for our advocacy program last year. So yes, excellent suggestions. And on that note, so a lot of you are utilizing my help for scheduling meetings. Some of you are scheduling them on your own. When I schedule meetings for you, I try very hard to, schedule Senate meetings back to back versus having you go from the Senate to the House to the Senate. It's not always possible. As you can imagine, these folks have busy schedules. So if it's the case, I think the divide and conquer is an excellent strategy. I also think that you are able to get a lot of steps in, so bring your Fitbits. And in terms of what Cindy mentioned, which is to drop off information or stop by to visit offices you don't have a meeting with, that is a wonderful strategy because you're in town, you might as well visit the folks who are representing you. And if you want extra packets of information from NAHMA for that kind of purpose, just let us know, ahead of time so that I can print out a bunch of extra info. Any questions or other pointers about logistics? So I just want to highlight a couple things here. So plan in about 40 minutes to get from the Fairmont Hotel, which is where the NAHMA meeting is, to get to the Hill. Most people seem to take, Uber or Lyft or a taxi, and taxis are really easy to catch outside the Fairmont. Public transit just isn't that great of a connection, but of course, you can try that. And a lot of people leave their luggage at the Fairmont, during these meetings. Let's see, there are some lunch options available. Don't bring gifts unless you are really confident in the Senate or in the congressional gift restrictions, the ethics guidelines.
Juliana, can I jump in here on that?
Yeah, for sure.
This is Deanne again.
Yeah.
What we've started doing in October is we bring the NAHMA calendar as a gift. And that works really well. And we've gotten a huge response from the congressional delegation on that.
Oh, I love that. Yes. And because those calendars cost $5.50 or whatnot, they fall within the bracket for the gifts. Excellent point. Yes. And if folks, you know, I know we're doing calendar orders right now. That's not my department, but I can set you up with the right folks here at NAHMA to do that if you want to order extra calendars for that purpose. Lastly, on logistics, security. So there are a couple things that don't go well through security. One are weapons, and the other, and this is, you know, sort of a joke, are egos. And the reason I bring that up is because DC, as you guys know, is a really ambitious place. There are a lot of people who, you know, may or may not be really important, but they all think they are, right? And so when we go to the Hill, we don't want to add to that energy. We don't want anybody there to feel like maybe we know a lot more than they do, which even though we certainly do about these housing programs, the folks who work on the Hill, especially the staff, are often young and inexperienced with housing programs. Now, that's not always true, right? Like there are some amazing staffers with incredible institutional knowledge, and some of you are meeting with those people. And you'll know who they are. So like Jason Woolwine comes to mind, Dave, Deanne, some of the folks you're meeting with. But a lot of the other staffers, they won't know the acronyms you're using. And so, you know, try to you know, check that at the door as well, and just go into it with a kind of open mind, and as a, you know, going in there just to be a resource to these folks who are trying to legislate on your behalf. So yeah, that's my little DC is ambitious spiel. But you guys already know that. Okay, any questions about logistics before I move on to our actual talking points?
Nope, we're good. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so this is our legislative platform for 2019, and I know it's a lot of words, and some of you have, you know, more or less expertise with this at the policy level. And so what I just want to highlight on this page are the 3 blue items, and those are the 3 things that NAHMA focuses on in terms of policy. So, you know, a lot of time we spend our time working with our members who are having, you know, issues on the ground about, you know, contract issues, et cetera, et cetera. But when we're working with Congress, we have these kind of 3 overarching buckets that we operate in. One is funding, so that's what keeps everything operating, right? So that's a critical thing we want to talk to Congress about. The second is the housing credit, so the housing tax credit program. And the reason for that is because it is, as you guys know, just really the primary tool for developing and preserving the affordable housing stock, and it has a lot of support in Congress. So that is one of the key things that we talked to the Hill about, including our main piece of legislation we're working on, which you guys have heard about, which is the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. And then lastly is this idea of the kind of affordable housing crisis in general. So we have, you know, these critical housing shortages, but some areas are tougher than others, right? Rural communities, senior populations where we have this ballooning senior population coming down the horizon, and we don't have the stock to meet that. Just these kind of more innovative ideas, so that we're not always being reactive to housing issues, but also proactive with solutions. So those are the 3 things that we generally talk to Congress about. Now, what does that mean for you guys who are going up to the Hill? So I understand that you guys, I work in policy, you guys don't, right? You guys are experts at these programs and you're experts at your job. So what this means for you is to find, you know, 1 or 2 of these things that really resonate with you or with your daily work or with, you know, your company's mission, and to tell a story based on your daily work that illustrates this kind of thing. So, you know, a good example of that might be, well, maybe some folks were affected by the shutdown that we had earlier this year. You know, maybe some contracts weren't renewed, or maybe your service coordinator funding has still not come through. You know, and so those are good examples of things that illustrate the funding piece. I think Dave has a really great story about, you know, the number of applications they get on a property. And that relates really well to funding, to tell Congress, like, look, we we are not able to serve everybody we want to serve, or that needs to be served in terms of housing. Dave, do you want to jump in with that story?
Sure. Actually, quick intro. When I first did my first Hill visit, maybe 3 or so years ago, unfortunately for me, there was not this great webinar that Juliana is sharing right now. So my experience was kind of like, Juliana is awesome one-on-one. So if you had questions, which I did, she was good to help prepare me, but I was real nervous. And I remember the day before at lunch speaking to Megan Davidson, and I told her how nervous I was. I'm not going to remember all this stuff, and just that kind of energy. And she said, the most important thing to do is to tell a story. You're talking to human beings. They relate well to story. They relate to numbers, but much more to the stories. And if you tell a story that's genuine and authentic, it really has powerful impact. So the story that I thought of, which was topical at the time, was we were doing a lease up in Boston of 35 units of tax credit and some home housing, very little deep subsidy, only 35 units. And we took 1,700 applications for those 35 units of housing. And as we took them in, people would come in with their applications, and when they found out how many units there were, only 35, they were incredibly discouraged. But they would tell us, why they deserved it, whatever their specific story was. And of the 1,700, about 900 people returned applications. So just over half who weren't as discouraged would decide, you know what, I'm never going to get this apartment. So 900 returned it, and of the 900, the only way to fairly handle that number for 35 units was through a lottery that the city had to monitor. So I told that story to Senator Warren's staff person, and before I told the story, I could tell that the discussion was going okay, but not as well as I had hoped. But once I told the story, it completely changed the dynamic of the discussion. It was far more interactive. He was much more interested in what they could do. So to Juliana's point, you tell a story that relates to something that you have experience with, so it's authentic, but that also illustrates the ask. So in that, and then from that point on, it was much more comfortable. The meetings were much more comfortable, but I would say that's probably the biggest thing I took away from the experience, was really tell a story that illustrates your ask.
Yeah, that is an excellent story. And I know we all have stories like that, whether it's about, the number of folks we're trying to serve, or whether it's, an issue that you're seeing every day. I know in March, a big topic was the REAC inspection notification timeframe. So I know a lot of folks went up to the Hill and said, what, 14 days? Like, how are we supposed to do our jobs? So whatever it is that really resonates with you. And I think, Amy, you had some good points about, the LIHTC program and how that's affected your communities. Not sure if you wanted to jump in with that now, or as we go through the talking points more.
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, everybody. Something that I shared with Juliana and Dave, and I think in some of the presentation materials on different ways that you can get your story across, is if you have a short video to share. So for us, and what I would be using, potentially using when we were doing our Hill visits in October, is we just recently leased up a very small but 30-unit family community in Columbus, Ohio. And we had 120 people apply, which I know is no difference from any of us that are doing lease ups, but the Columbus Dispatch, the Columbus newspaper, came out and did a story, and also took a video. And so it's a short video clip that has interviews of the the folks who are applying, and pretty touching on, especially for those that they were interviewing that were so far down in the wait list that they knew that they weren't going to get housing, and that they're living out of their car and things of that nature. So sharing that message and, thanking them for the work that they are doing, but also showing that the need still exists. And here are some real live examples. If you can't bring the residents with you, kind of having those videos, which I know a lot of you also do, is pretty meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Walk me through the mechanics of how you show them a video. Are you looking on your phone, your laptop, or?
Yeah,
I mean, I've done it on a laptop, so just have the video link teed up, and done it on the laptop, or a phone is fine. I mean, if that's the easiest media source.
I've done it on an iPad, but I also discovered that it's important to check that if you need Wi-Fi, that your iPad Wi-Fi is compatible or is working with what exists at the building that you're at. So have a backup. So I had it on the iPad, and then the Wi-Fi was so intermittent, the video was difficult to show. So I did show it on the phone as a backup.
Okay.
And Cindy, I know you and Nancy show really great videos also. What do you guys use again? Is it an iPad?
We've used a Surface or an iPad. And
Yeah.
what we do, instead of relying on the Wi-Fi, we make sure that the videos are on the computer that we're using.
Yeah. Yep.
The Surface worked really well for doing that, just having the videos on a thumb drive.
Yeah. And I know some folks, and so if you're heading up to the Hill and you don't have a video planned, don't worry. That is like next level. That's like, graduate level Hill visit person. So if you don't have a video ready, some other ideas for making something more visually engaging. I know some folks are bringing in photos, or some people are going in to talk about COQ properties that that have won something, or a Vanguard Award, and they're bringing in the kind of write-up with the pictures, or they're just bringing anecdotes from the property, like we talked about. So don't worry if you don't have something like that. There's always room for improvement as we do these Hill visits. As we're talking about that, what other kinds of materials? I know I have the talking points pulled up, but before we go into that, what other kinds of materials do folks like to use in Hill visits?
This is Cindy again. Our housing, as some of you may or may not know, is senior housing. We do the senior affordable, so we're dealing with seniors as the residents. And we have done petitions. We even asked folks, this was a few years ago, we asked them to write letters, and we took copies of the letters and dumped stacks of letters on the desks of the offices that we visited. So
yeah. That's great. Deanne, what about you guys? What do you use during the meetings?
We really use most of the stuff that you prepare for us in the packet, but I can tell you what, in every single office, and we visit 12 of them, is they go crazy for the affordable housing in their district. That the sheet that you do that shows every affordable housing and what they are, tax credit, RD, whatever. Mm-hmm. Every time we pull that out and show it to them, even though we've been there 6 months before and it's the same person, they get excited all over again of like, oh, this is great information. Mm-hmm. So we really lean into that. And then we emphasize how many of those are our members.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that actually reminds me to tell you guys, so when you're doing, and a lot of you know this already, but when you're doing Hill visits, I reach out to you guys to let you know, great, I have some set up for you. Hopefully it's what you had asked for. Hopefully, hopefully the schedule is manageable. And then when you get to the NAHMA meeting, I have packets waiting for you. So those are folders that have information in them. They have fact sheets. They have the list, the map that Deanne mentioned. And they also have, a lot of info about the funding levels that NAHMA is asking for, or background on the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. So if you don't feel like an expert on those things, it's not a problem at all. You can just say, please fund these programs, and for more, for details, look in the packet. You can tell the staffer the numbers are in the packet. So it's not like you have to memorize anything like that.
For this year, though, while we're not happy, it's not the worst funding we've ever seen, right? We've got, a better than OCAF increase.
For 2009, it was pretty good. After the 2018 and 2019 were good. We had new construction funding. We had sufficient funding for renewals of all contracts. So those are things you can say. And certainly thank Congress for their hard work on that. The issue now is that we are actually already in fiscal year 2020, and we're still operating under 2019 levels. So we're under what's called a continuing resolution, which means that Congress wasn't able to come to an agreement on time for the funding. So we're in this kind of limbo zone where we're trying to operate 2020 under 2019 dollars. And the reason that's hard is because of inflation and things like that make us have to use fewer in today's dollars to do more. So we certainly need a full year funding bill.
Is it just our funding, or is it the total budget? Because
it is the total budget.
So, but the number for us is again not terrible, right?
Well, the 2019 funding bill was okay for 2019. For 2020, it's a different picture, and since that fiscal year already started, one program in particular, and that was the elderly, so that's HUD 202 program, was actually facing a dire situation with their contracts. So contracts were only going to be renewed just in time if there was enough money, and rent increases weren't going to happen, et cetera. And so we actually worked with Congress to get a small extra in this kind of limbo zone that we're in. So this is not an ideal situation by any means. Yeah. Because the fiscal, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, one other thing. I mean, we're asking them to, and I think this is in here, is just secure the 4% credit. So make it at 4%. And we're trying to get that done through hopefully a tax bill. I don't know if that's something that helps create more affordable housing. So I do think that that's something that can tie to our story about how to create more affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a point that we want to. Yeah. I think you have that in that second bullet point, right?
Yeah. Let's segue actually to this. So this is
sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, that was perfect to cue me up for that. So the way that a Hill visit happens, and in terms of the flow, so you on the House side, what have you guys experienced? Like 15 minutes, less?
This is
Yeah,
Dave.
15 minutes.
I found that it varies. It varies. Like with certain folks, it's quick. I think with the more junior members that you described, sometimes when you're doing all the talking and you're kind of lifting the entire load of the discussion and kind of educating them, it probably goes to that amount. But I've also had an exchange with Congresswoman Clark's staff person who was very senior, and he shared a lot of information in that discussion. He had just met with Mass Housing. So that conversation went longer. It was a lot more interactive. It was a lot more educational from their side. Like they were sharing with us what they were planning to do. And at that time, there was some real concern about the budget that the administration had submitted, which was much lower than what we were asking for. And he was like, "Don't pay attention to that. We pay no attention to that administration's budget." It was actually, again, it was very interesting to get a window into how they look at things. So it really depends on the person who you're meeting with. So it's varied.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, the House side meetings are usually a little shorter, and then on the Senate side, often they're often they're a little longer. And basically you want to start out with, introductions, just like you would in any meeting you're in. And you're usually sitting in a room around a table with, whoever else that you came with, and maybe one or two, sometimes three staffers. And sometimes we pair you with somebody else from, another NAHMA member who has communities in the same geographic location. And the reason is that the Hill offices don't want two meetings with the same type of people, right? And so that's why we pair you up. And even though sometimes that's hard for you guys to navigate, to kind of share the message and share space in that. So we appreciate everybody's patience with that. Okay, somebody is typing very vigorously, and while I'm admiring your typing skills, either pause or mute while you're not talking. Okay, and then you want to introduce yourself in these meetings in a couple of ways. And one is to introduce yourself, a little more personally. So, what is your connection to the state or district? Why are you there? Establish some kind of rapport, just like you would in a regular meeting you're having. Whether it's talking about the weather or your flight or the district, just something to kind of establish a little bit of rapport. And then you go into the reason that you're actually there, which is more of a professional reason, and you can talk about what you do. On a day-to-day basis. And this is really a chance for you not just to talk in acronyms and federal programs, but to really tell the more human side, and to talk about, and to connect it for the staff person, because, DC is a bubble. A lot of those folks are from the area that you're talking about, and they love to hear about it, because they don't get to leave the Hill that much. And so, any kind of stories here, or, instead of saying, I have properties through the HUD Section 202 program, you might say, the seniors who live in my communities are like this, XYZ. So that's just the more human side that a couple folks have mentioned already. And then you want to kind of jump into your main points, or the main ask. And again, it's okay if you're not an expert on any of the, kind of NAHMA talking points, but if you have questions about the funding situation, I'm happy to elaborate more on that. So as I said, currently we're in a continuing resolution. So that is a short-term funding situation that gives Congress a little more time to pass a full year funding bill. And those full year funding bills allow for us to have some stability in the industry. They allow for you all to plan ahead better in terms of operating expenses. They allow HUD to be more efficient. And they also allow lenders to have more certainty in the business. So all around, full year funding bills are really important. Let's see. Yeah, so any questions about the funding messaging?
Juliana, this isn't a question, it's more of a comment. I did notice in a couple of our meetings, so someone had made the point of the materials that you and NAHMA give to us, that they specifically look for those funding levels as we give out those packets. So so in whatever context that they're using those numbers, it's very helpful. So that packet, so when I've met with the same person a couple of times, one of the first things they do is jump to the numbers.
Yeah.
So
yep. And I just so I just pulled this fact sheet up. This will be in your packets. It has some background info on what federal rental assistance actually is, and whom it serves. I've been on the Hill, and folks have been like, what's Section 8? Right? And so, but I've also been there, and folks have said, I'm not that familiar with these. Can you give me a quick, some quick background on what you do? A lot of folks think that affordable housing is all public housing or vouchers. So you might say, we work in project-based, so we have multifamily building, et cetera, whatever it is that you work in. And then on the second page, excuse me, on the second page here, at the bottom, we have all of these numbers. So if a staffer wants numbers, this is where, so then you can just say, well, in the packet, here's this fact sheet, and here are the numbers. And these are numbers that have been proposed for FY20. And so there is a good chance that, these are not, the numbers look high, right? Just like when you're talking in billions, it just sounds like a lot of money. But these are not numbers that we arbitrarily come up with. These are numbers that are enough to serve people at inflationary costs, the same number of people. And in some cases, if there's an extra need, like under the elderly, we know that we need to increase the stock with new construction funding, et cetera, and service coordinators. So just so you know, sometimes you're going into more friendly offices and they're like, great, let's fund affordable housing. Sometimes you're going into less friendly offices and they say, well, why, of all the things that Congress needs to fund, why should I fund this? And, and so then it's really helpful to know that these are not, arbitrarily high numbers. These are numbers that will keep the people who are currently housed. Okay. So where are we? Here we are. Okay, so that's the funding piece. And so if that's something that really resonates with you, then, and you have a good story about that, then by all means focus on that. If you have something totally different that you want to focus on, whether it's, REAC or service coordinators or rural infrastructure, by all means do that. I don't know if you guys can see my email notices popping up, but somebody from Indiana just got a meeting confirmed. So congrats. I think that's you, Alan. Okay, then the second piece is the tax credit program, and that is what Amy mentioned with the permanent 4% credit rate. The piece of legislation is called the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, and there will be a fact sheet about it in your packets. There's a lot of support for this in Congress. So a lot of times before your meetings, I'm going to reach out and tell you, the person you're meeting with, the lawmaker you're meeting with, is a strong supporter of this, so make sure to thank them. Or I might say, they are not yet co-sponsors of this bill. It might be a good idea to ask them where they stand on it, or if they're aware of it, et cetera. And but that's also something you guys can do as you prep for these meetings. You can look up that bill, and I can show you guys real quick the best way to do that. You can go to congress.gov. You can type in, if you don't know the bill number, Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. I think I do know the bill number. Okay, here we go. So that's the House version, that's the Senate version. So here we go, and you can see 17 co-sponsors in the Senate is actually a lot. That's almost 20%. I know the House has quite a bit more, and you can see that it's pretty bipartisan. And you can look here, and you can look by state if you want. You can see if the people that you have meetings set up with are already listed as co-sponsors. And
Viviana, can you quickly describe what co-sponsors are?
Yeah, so co-sponsors are the people who have put their name on a bill in support of it officially. So this bill in the Senate was introduced by Senator Cantwell from Washington State, who has just been fantastic. And I know, Deanne, you've spent a lot of time meeting with her office. And then, so one person officially introduces something, and then colleagues in Congress co-sponsor it. And so that's their official show of support. And we can look at the House version, and we can see, so that's a lot of co-sponsors. That is a fantastic number. Yeah, so you can check by state to see if your folks are signed on, and if they're not, it's definitely worth checking with them about that. And I just want to highlight a couple things about the bill. So it's a really in-depth bill, and if you don't work in the tax credit program, by all means skip over that. But if you do, then like Amy said, the permanent 4% credit rate would be very helpful. additional development incentives for rural areas, and other hard to reach areas. So this would adjust the program to allow for some, some boosting of development in areas that are underserved and that are hard to develop in financially. So it makes them more financially feasible. It also allows you to specifically serve special populations like veterans. And then it makes some other adjustments, including to the student rule. So it would make some exceptions. It would allow for single mothers who are going back to school, for example, to access affordable housing, or folks who were formerly homeless, or veterans, et cetera. So those are some of the key parts, but there will be a whole fact sheet about it if this is a key talking point for you, if this is something that resonates with you, then by all means read up on it and feel free to talk about it in those meetings. Any questions about our talking points on the tax credit program? Okay, then I will just jump in here to this third talking point item, which is really an opportunity for you to talk about whatever you're really seeing on the ground. Well, I've been in meetings where people talked about disaster recovery. I've been in meetings where people talked about homelessness, service coordinators, things like that. So whatever it is that is really resonating with you, and some of the key things that we've identified are really investing in the rural affordable housing programs, investing in seniors through new construction, and then there's this new item here that we've added, which is a family self-sufficiency program through HUD. And if you don't know what that is, I'm happy to give you more background on it. But basically, just programs that help folks, improve their lives and through asset building. So these are opportunities for you to talk about issues or solutions or ideas, et cetera. And within that, you can always ask the staffer, and you should actually always ask, what they're working on, what their priorities are, and how you can help. Great. Any questions about the talking points or anything anybody wants to share about how they approach the meetings or what they talk about? Deanne, if you're still on, would you give an example of how you guys, what you guys talk about? Sorry
Sure.
to put you on the spot.
That's okay. So, we usually have 2 or 3 people, and I don't know if Jennifer's still on the line. She can jump in too, because we did this together for a lot of years.
Mm.
Again, we start out thanking them specifically. And we usually don't meet with the staff, with the actual congressional representative. We're usually with the staff. So we ask them to convey our thanks to the congressperson very specifically for, like, we'll be meeting with Cantwell's office and we will talk about thank her for sponsoring that bill. So, and then we go through the packet, highlight things, and we don't spend a lot of time on the packet because we say you can have this for later, to refer back to. And then we go into the stories, whatever, again, in March, it was about the REAC, and they gave very specific examples of how that was going to impact, or why that wasn't a good idea, and how affordable housing works and how their property management company works. And or back when MORs weren't happening, we gave very specific examples of why that was important. And in some offices we kind of get blank stares, and then in others, like Representative Heck's office, it's like a master's class in affordable housing. We do like a philosophical half an hour with him on, well, if we tweak this, what would happen then? So it's kind of all over the spectrum of what we get in each office. But it's the connection to the office, and we always, whoever is from that district, we make a point to say, oh, this is my congresswoman or this is my congressman, and we live here. Or we talk about specific properties in that district. Here's, and, you said earlier, the COQ. We had a COQ winner a couple of years ago, and we really hammered that in that property, in that district, and talked about how important that was. So again, just like you were saying, the stories are what's so important. And pictures and videos are great too, because the legislators love to have that so that they can put them on their website, or they can, the stories are what they use to go back and help influence their colleagues. So we always look at it as, we're giving them information to help them do their jobs.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes. Great.
And I'm going to bring up one more thing that Jennifer Wood said this, and I use it all the time now because I think it's a perfect thing. And especially when we're talking about funding and talking about the ways that the government shutdown hurt people and things. And I think at every meeting now, we talk about the importance of the public-private partnership, and that we have an expectation that the federal government is a good partner and follows through with their commitments. So when we're talking about funding things, and that really resonates with them too, because you're talking about the investors that are losing money. I mean, you can talk about it at the human level of the people that don't have housing, but you can also talk about it like there are people here that are investing their hard-earned money that are losing it because of the way the federal government is behaving. And like you said, in some of the offices that might not be so in support of affordable housing, that has really resonated with them.
Yes, excellent points. You guys have such a good advocacy program. That's great. And while we're actually talking about that, and so I know we've geared this a little bit toward people who are brand new to Hill Visits, but for folks who keep returning year after year or sometimes twice a year, and often you're meeting with the same staff, maybe we can talk just briefly, I have an eye on the time, just briefly about how you keep it fresh in those meetings. I know that when I'm meeting with the same people, and because I'm based in DC, I meet with these people a lot, and I say, since we last talked, here is something that has shifted, or here is something new that's come to my attention, or let me update you on that community I talked to you about, and this is how the residents are doing. Or I might say, so since we last talked, what are the priorities for your office, and what kind of resources can I provide to help you advance that? What about you guys who have done these multiple times? How do you keep it kind of fresh and relevant?
Juliana, this is Dave. I try to, as you mentioned, find something that's different since the last meeting, but I wanted to actually pivot quickly. I have two Congress people that I'm trying to meet with this time. So Congresswoman Presley was one whom we couldn't get a meeting with the last time in March. But since then, she attended a ribbon cutting at one of our properties, and she spoke. And then I also attended a town hall of hers and actually got her to answer a question. So the goal there is, a perfect opportunity now to introduce that to the discussion, her attendance at the ribbon cutting and what that meant to that community, and thank the staff person for her participation, and then talk about some of the things that she shared. And a similar experience with Congresswoman Trahan in Lawrence. She attended a ribbon cutting, and at that same ribbon cutting, one of the state officials asked her specifically to support the low-income housing tax credit program. So it's like, oh, perfect. Gives an opportunity to kind of reintroduce that topic. So part of it is just, keeping your ear to the ground to see what's different, what's happened that's different, and referencing that, what's current, reference the talking points, which do get updated as well. So if you have a personal situation that's changed, and that's good, but you just have to kind of try to keep that. You're keeping the same energy around the message of preservation and development and funding, but you're just trying to tell it in different ways.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, great points. So just in the last few minutes here, look at me being actually on time about something. Let's just talk about, and this is really important, and it's the follow-up, because I mean it is an incredible effort to meet with these people. I mean, it's not something that everybody does, right? And we just really appreciate that you do. And the way that you can amplify it and give it so much more weight is by pretty simple follow-up items. And one of those is sending a follow-up email. And this will just, continue to have your message on the office's radar. It will also make it easier the next time you want to meet with them, or the next time you have an issue or an event, et cetera. Then you have this kind of contact that you've maintained. And so let me pull, oh, you guys might not be able to see this actually. Can you see this follow-up email?
No.
Okay, so let me just show you where it is on the website. We have a follow-up email, a sample, and this is where it is. So under this page, and it just has some generic language and then some areas for you to fill in personal stuff that's highlighted. So please, please, please send this email. You can CC me on it in case the lawmaker or the staff person writes back with questions that maybe you don't have time or the knowledge to field. That's totally fine. We can handle it from there. But this is just a really good step. The other piece is to you can make a real follow-up plan with these people if you want. So if inviting them to a COQ property or to a ribbon cutting or just to to a property that is in their district, if that's something you want to do, then by all means bring that up to the staff person and let them know that you'd love to have them out there in person to see the great value that it is to the community, or just to see firsthand what it's like. And these are some takeaways that were generated by through a webinar that we held last year about property visits. So this is on the webpage if that's something that you want to do. This is also really key. So this is a page where you can share your experience on the Hill. And it's not just, to like practice self-expression, which is also important, but it helps me to know, who to follow up with in Congress, who to meet with, what to talk about when I do meet with them, et cetera, which is just, really helpful to our coordinated efforts in an ongoing way. And you can either, fill this page out, which this is available on this same webpage here under the resources, or you can just email me and say, quick note about the meetings you had. Met with the staffer, he was interested in rural stuff, or whatever it is that will help me out throughout the year. And speaking of the year, so even though this is about Hill visits, we really do support folks year-round in their advocacy, whether it's in DC or at your home district. And so we have this advocacy toolkit, and it has just a lot of info on it. It has our platform, it has info about site visits, lawmakers, et cetera, et cetera. So feel free to peruse that if you are interested in the more year-round advocacy. Okay, any questions? Oh, please also, if social media is your thing, we have a couple hashtags that we use, NAHMA19 and hashtag #ScoreMoreHousing, and it's great, not just for, it's not just fun to share this stuff on social media and share pictures of you in your snazzy suits on the Hill, but also, sometimes the lawmakers repost those or retweet those if you tag them. We certainly do, and it just really amplifies the effort. So keep that in mind as you're walking around the Hill to take photos and stay connected. Any questions or comments?
Juliana, this is Dave. One final comment. In the next steps, there's a note about scheduling property tours, the legislative scheduling property tours. One thing I found that it's important, if you plan to do that, is to kind of grease the wheel for that in advance, like have an idea of which properties and get any senior level approval that you need to do. Because I did that once and didn't get that approval. I discussed with a staff person about a property tour, and when I got back, it took a lot to try to organize the tour. And by the time I got back to the staff person, it was months later, and then there was no answer, no response. So if you plan to do that property tour piece, it's good to have that prepared in advance, so that if you get agreement at that meeting that they would like to do it, then it just makes the process go better.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So have your follow-up ideas, ready and prepped. In fact, in the last minute here, let me just briefly talk about, what you need to do to prepare. So if you have not heard from me about, like, if you didn't get a confirmation from me that I'm working on scheduling Hill visits for you, you should reach back out to me, because maybe I missed your email. So everybody that I have started scheduling Hill visits with knows about it. So if you don't, reach out to me. We have about 50 plus meetings pending, or confirmed. So then the next thing really is just for you to hone in on your story that you want to tell. So, based on the talking points we went over today, find what resonates for you, and, find the story that you want to tell and the examples that you want to give, and reach out to me for more info if you need background on any of it. But you guys are the experts. You do this every day. You work in these programs every day. And then, if you are interested about what's in the packets, feel free to look through these resources on that webpage about what's available, the fact sheets, etc. And then just know how you're going to follow up, whether it's a property tour invitation or the next time you're in town, etc. Anything I missed that folks can do for preparing for this?
Nope, I think you're outstanding.